Welcome to another edition of HBCU Sports Live. I'm Kendrick Marshall. That's Cris Stevens. And that is Jared Hoffman. And today, all the news that could possibly break has broken today. And we're going to talk all about it. But first, before we get started, please sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Hit the like button, subscribe. If you want to donate to, we'll be pleased with that as well. Also, follow us on social media at X, on Facebook, and on Instagram. And obviously, read all of our work on our website at hbcusports.com. So, fellas, after what it seems like nearly 3 months, Texas Southern has finally named the head coach. And their head coach was an ex-NFL player. Cris Dishman played for several teams in the NFL. Houston Texans, Houston Oilers, Minnesota Vikings, Washington Redskins. After this search that lasted, seemed like forever, he was the guy named today by Texas Southern. So, fellas, starting with Chris, what do we think about this surprising hire? We all thought that Fred McNair was going to be the guy. It seemed like he was, but then the Board of Regents shifted, and now we have Dishman aboard.
Well, first of all, I want to start off by saying, in regards to Fred McNair, it probably looks really, it's probably disheartening for him. But the old saying goes, "What's for you is for you." And honestly, does he really deserve Texas Southern? The answer to that is no. I mean, this has probably been the most egregious, ridiculous, insane, for the moment anyway, coaching search we've seen in Black college sports in quite some time. And it was so funny because I fell asleep and I woke up in the middle of the night and I saw that you had put out the alert that Andre Johnson was taking his name out of the hat, and I had a hearty laugh before I actually went back to sleep, because you did all of this for an NFL player with no coaching experience, and he sees the writing on the wall. He sees that this is a dumpster fire, so he takes his name out of the hat, and you go and get another former NFL player. Granted, this one with coaching experience. Of course, Cris Dishman has been a DB's coach all across the continent of North America. So it's not like he's a foreigner to coaching, but, this is his first head coaching job. So at this point, if you're a Texas Southern fan, you really have to be wondering if it's going to be any point in going to the games this year. Because, I mean, granted, we don't know that much about, Cris Dishman as a coach, and we won't know this year because Texas Southern's already missed all the deadlines. I mean, they missed early signing day, they missed the portal, they're going to miss the official signing day, because I don't know if Coach Dishman can hit the road in that sort of a time and be able to say, okay, come on over to Houston, Texas, and rock with us. So right now, yeah, they have a coach, but do they have a program worth building around? That is the question that remains to be seen at this point.
Jared Hoffman, your thoughts?
Well, we're just gonna have to see how things play out for him, because, as Chris put it, he's up against the gauntlet. He's coming into the game very late. Early signing day is going to be in the next couple of weeks, and like I said this months ago when they were talking about when they were entrenched in the Fred McNair and Andre Johnson sweepstakes. I'll be surprised if this team wins a conference game this season. I just don't see it happening. I mean, we'll see. But I feel like this season is a wash. I feel like they need to start building towards 2025. That's what they need to start doing, because 2024 is over with. The Board of Regents, they stifled this team and they stalled this team, and they're probably going to suffer as a result.
Yeah, Dishman is definitely behind the 8 ball when it comes to recruiting. Like you guys have said repeatedly, like the clock is ticking on that. The National Signing Day is February the 7th, and nearly a month before that, you just name a head coach, and just getting into the kind of like the machinations of like all of this. We confirmed Cal Mosley's report, who writes for HBCU Legends, that Dishman was going to be the coach. And so we reached out to our sources at Texas Southern, and we asked why Dishman and not Fred McNair, because Fred McNair was the preferred choice of AD Kevin Granger and the school's president. But after AD Granger submitted the recommendation to the board felt like that Fred McNair, and we're quoting our sources on this, that his name didn't have the cachet that somebody else would. That's why they went after Andre Johnson. That's why they reached out to Rod Woodson, most recently, the former Pittsburgh Steeler, Pro Football Hall of Famer, to see his interest. And that's why they obviously reached out to Cris Dishman. He played for the Oilers, knows the area, Houston, coached at Baylor as an assistant, so he has ties in Texas. And I'm gonna put his bio up on the screen here. You guys can check it out. But yeah, so you can see the list of places he's been. He started his career as a coach in Berlin, Germany, as a defensive backs coach, all the way down to his last job, which was the Vegas Vipers. He was a D coordinator there. That's the XFL team last season. So he has a lot of coaching experience, to say, but not a head coach. And Fred McNair was a head coach, a very successful head coach in the SWAC, but there was some concerns by the board that they couldn't sell Fred McNair to the public. He wouldn't be able to galvanize the fan base. And we were also told by the source that there were some concerns about how he presented himself in press conferences to the media that will result in him not being seen as someone who's sophisticated enough for the job. So those kind of factors played into why Fred McNair allegedly wasn't the head coach, but it seemed like all signs were pointing for him to be the coach. But yet, because the board seemingly was kind of desperate to get an ex-NFL player in there to be the coach, they wanted to make a splash hire, and they wanted to hire somebody that had a name. They wanted to hire somebody with NFL a background and experience, and Fred McNair didn't have that. And so that's why he's not the coach. And Cris Dishman is. So guys, with that being said, what do you think about some of the reasons why Fred McNair didn't get this job? Starting with Jared.
I just want to know are we looking for a football coach or a reality? That I don't understand it. You want somebody that's presentable in press conferences. When have you ever looked at Fred McNair and ever thought that he wasn't presentable? I've never looked at Fred McNair and thought, oh, he's not somebody that I would want to lead my program. No. Nobody in the history of common sense has ever looked at Fred McNair and said, oh, I don't want him coaching my program. That's the dumbest thing in the world. And they're so set on hiring a former NFL player. How often has that ever worked out that a guy who didn't go to an HBCU, has no experience playing for or coaching for an HBCU, who was a former NFL player, comes to an HBCU and has immediate success? Other than Deion. Deion is an anomaly. Stop comparing people to Deion. Stop it. There's no, I guarantee if you look at the history books, there's not too many guys, if any, forget just HBCU football history, in college football history. How many guys who have had little to no experience coming from the NFL, had no experience coming in coaching, and went to a program and had immediate success? It's rarely ever happened, if it has ever happened, other than Deion, who is an anomaly because he is such a global star. So when people say they want to make these splash hires, people got to understand that splash hires are rare. They're rare. Like people got to understand that building a program takes years. It's not something that you could just snap your fingers and it'll all come together. No, there's a lot of factors that come together to make building that comes with building a program, and it takes a lot of patience. And Texas Southern has shown themselves to be a program that has unworthy impatience, because you've been bad for a long time. That should give you even more reason to be even more patient, because you didn't do anything in this coaching search that made me think that you have a warranted sense of urgency. Because if you would have made it clear what you were looking for in the beginning, you probably would have been at a coach by now, and you would have had a much better signing day than you probably would have had you hired somebody earlier. So this is just a board of regents that clearly showing they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know nothing about the SWAC. Because if you know anything about the SWAC, you would know that there is no question about Fred McNair's appearance, and there's no question about Fred McNair being a guy that people will look at and say he is the leader of a collegiate program.
Yeah, Cris, your thoughts?
Jared said it all, quite honestly. It's gonna be hard for me to follow that, but I'll try. That being said, there's really nothing else to say other than Texas Southern has just thoroughly embarrassed themselves in a way that we have not seen probably in a long time. Yes, we can argue that the Florida A&M situation is really, really, veering towards that, but Texas Southern already, has veered into that lane of thorough embarrassment. There's really no sense of, as Jared said, there's a lack of common sense going on here, because as he said, there's only one Deion Sanders, as polarizing as he is. And that's why there's only one Deion Sanders. You're not going to get, this coach that's going to come in and, all of a sudden, make these sweeping changes, increase resources and, get these name brand players. It's just not going to happen like that, because only Deion Sanders could have done that. And of course, Deion is going to do it now that he's got Florida A&M's chief recruiter. That's another story for another topic. But I just hope that nobody at Texas Southern has any grand expectations about 2024, because it's a wrap. If you don't have Virginia University of Lynchburg or Lincoln University of California on your schedule, it's a wrap. It wouldn't surprise me if Valley hung like 40 on them. Arkansas Pine Bluff is going to go ahead and just run up and down the field and listen. I'm going to call Delaware State AD Alicia Shields Gaston and head coach Lee Hall and see if we can get Texas Southern on the schedule this year, because that's a guaranteed win for us, at least. This is going to be a horrible team this year. And I don't think that anybody with any reasonable sense of, reality can see anything good coming from Texas Southern in 2024. 2025, maybe. But this year, it's not going to be pretty.
Yes, people in the comments and thanks for making comments and participating. We really appreciate your comments. People are like you guys are kind of like perplexed over Cris Dishman being hired. Others are like, well, give him a chance. But he has NFL experience, he has coaching experience, although not a head coach experience. But you guys are just counting TSU out for next year. The SWAC West isn't exactly a juggernaut, or will be a juggernaut. And we got some news on that, kind of like why that is in our next segment. But yeah, there's all this turnover in the SWAC. There's going to be 3 first-time head coaches in the SWAC West alone. You got Grambling, you got Southern. Now you have Texas Southern in Alcorn State with all first-year coaches. So they're going to be competitive, but since they've been so behind the eight ball, like, can they make up this ground of not being able to recruit and not being able to work as a functioning football organization with the concrete staff in place? Can they overcome this delay in the search to be competitive next year?
No. I'm sorry. I don't see it, because yes, you make great points, but the gentleman that's stepping in for Fred McNair at Alcorn, he knows the program. Terrence Graves at Southern, even though they made him jump through hoops, he was the interim coach when they won the Bayou Classic. Mickey Joseph knows his way around the SWAC, knows his way around Louisiana territory. They'll be fine. Bubba McDowell is already ahead of the field because, of course, he has experience coaching in the SWAC. So I just don't see it. I mean, in Arkansas Pine Bluff and they weren't terrible last year. I mean, it was just that, there were better teams ahead of them. So I just don't see it for Texas Southern in 2024. The way that they've handled this has just been, just miserable from the word go. And I feel sorry for anybody that was involved in that coaching search that thought they had a chance or wanted a chance, because right now it just feels like Cris Dishman is the one who, drew the number one slot in the Royal Rumble. And, Royal Rumble is 30 participants. Now you got to try to throw 29 other guys over the top rope for that chance at the WWE Championship. Cris Dishman is going to Texas Southern's probably going to be eliminated by about, say, participant 5 or 6. It's just something that I don't see happening for that team this year.
And I'll just quickly say this: any team that loses to them, you should be ashamed of yourself. You should not lose to this team. Like I think that.
Let me stop you there for a minute. Like, they came on pretty strong at the end of the season. They beat Alcorn State by 40 points, and they got Jace Wilson, who is a promising young quarterback. He was actually named like SWAC, like newcomer of the year, because of the way he played this season. So is there a chance that like maybe we're like kind of like exaggerating their downfall, or do we just think like because it's going to take some time for the coach to establish himself in the system that like they're going to have an uphill battle this season?
Let me tell you this: if they win 2 games, give them SWAC Coach of the Year. At that point, like I feel like we should. I feel like Cris Dishman deserves the benefit of the doubt. He's a guy with coaching experience, and he has ties to the Houston area. Having played for the Houston Oilers, so I feel like he deserves a chance to succeed or fail. Like, yes, you're plotting his downfall right here. It's not his fault. It's the Board of Regents' fault that we're plotting his downfall. So, but I think he deserves a chance to prove us wrong. There's a great chance that he could prove us wrong. Maybe they win against Arkansas Pine Bluff. Maybe they get Mississippi Valley State on the schedule and they get a win over them. Maybe they get another upset win over Alcorn this year. I'm just saying, and I don't want to speak for Cris, but I think I can speak for Cris when I say I don't see it happening.
Wow, you guys are some Debbie Downers. But I will say, like, reading our message board, you can go on our message board. A lot of Texas Southern people participating in the message board aren't happy with the hire either. Number one, because it took so long for it to happen. And number two, the thought process is, we're passing up a really good head coach for someone who doesn't have head coaching experience, who may have coaching experience, but
looks like Kendrick froze on us. So yeah, he's making great points. Honestly, that
college,
yeah,
and certainly.
You back?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay.
Y'all get me? Okay, yeah. Yes, I was saying like it's a lot of angst, I would say, from the TSU people. There may be some people out there who support the hire, but I think there's just a lot of disenchantment with the board itself for like how long they dragged out this process. I wrote a story that published this morning talking to a couple of ADs. Reggie Theus with Boone Cookman, just a cable at Alabama State. And they both said, like, when we recommend somebody, obviously the recommendation got to go up to chain of command. But like when we recommend somebody, it almost always is approved by the Board of Regents. Like Cable say, never been a part of a situation where his recommendation or recommendation from an AD wasn't approved by the Board of Regents. But it's the first time for everything, and it happened at Texas Southern. And because they were intent on hiring a specific type of coach with a certain background, and that's who they got. So it's interesting to see like how it's all going to play out. Like I'm kind of wondering like how Dishman is going to try to endear himself to the fan base and to the community to get more support. Because if you can go to celebrity coach hire, Cris Dishman is the first name I think of with that. To be honest with you,
Nope.
Yeah, it's not the first name. Like he doesn't excite me. A lot of people were like, "Who? What?" And not like, "Oh my God, yeah, we're excited. We're gonna sell out the stadium. We're gonna buy season tickets." Like that doesn't galvanize me at all. If I'm a TSU fan about like wanting to see the team play, I may be intrigued by like how they might do, but like waiting for the season to start, like nah, like it had to be something different than Cris Dishman. But like we didn't make the decision, so everybody got to live with it and find out kind of like how it plays out.
Yeah, I find it interesting that, because I'm probably the oldest one on this call, so I do remember Cris Dishman playing for the Houston Oilers. I also remember his last year in the NFL when he was a Minnesota Viking. Monday Night Football 2000, Minnesota at Green Bay. He's on coverage of Antonio Freeman. He knocks the ball away. He thinks that he's won the game, but Antonio Freeman, the ball never hits the ground. Antonio Freeman gets up, starts running, wins the game in overtime for Green Bay. So that Cris Dishman, that is who Cris Dishman, the football player, is. I mean, if anybody needs a friendly reminder, because of course that was 23 years ago, and of course, again, I'm the oldest person on this call, so there you go. Again, as far as his coaching chops, remain to be seen. He may be a great DB coach, but coaching an entire staff and 95 to 100 players, whole nother thing entirely. Be very interested to see how that works out.
Yeah, and speaking of players, there was a big time transaction that happened ironically on the same day the Texas Southern announced they had a head coach, and that was their former quarterback Andrew Body announcing that he entered he's committed to Alabama State. He had been in the transfer portal for about a month or so, and we were all speculating of like where he might go, what he might do. He was a Clarence McKinney recruit, and so when Clarence McKinney was not renewed, his contract was not renewed by Texas Southern, he decided to hop in the portal, and I think he might have been waiting to see what Texas Southern was going to do before he made a decision. This photo shoot obviously was taken long before the news of the day happened. But yeah, so guys, like, what do we think about Andrew Body, one of the top quarterbacks not only in the SWAC, but in all of the FCS, going from the SWAC West to a competitive SWAC East now?
I think honestly, it makes Alabama State, a little bit more of a favorite. I mean, we talked about this in on our last live stream, that we may have been too generous in giving Florida A&M the automatic repeat. Of course, this was before we knew that Willie Simmons was leaving and the resulting fallout from that. So Alabama State has had probably the best defense in the SWAC the last 3 or 4. Am I still here?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It looked like my screen went out. I'm sorry. But yeah, now that you add a top flight quarterback to that offense, and they already have a really good defense, and this is going to be my last gasp because I got to head out to another appointment. But I think this makes Alabama State, I don't want to say the favorite in the SWAC East, but definitely one of the ones that people should highly consider, because now they'll have the general to lead that offense. They still need to put some guys around him in terms of, an offensive line and running back and a couple of receivers. But as much as Alabama State can, return, I mean, you can build it around a guy like Andrew Body, and I feel like that makes them one of the favorites in the East this year.
Yeah, so Jared, like, you follow recruiting for us for our website. You do a really good job of kind of being tapped into that. Like, where do you see this putting Alabama State on the hierarchy in the SWAC East? Are they going to be among the favorites with Jackson State, with FAMU? And we don't know who their coach is going to be yet. So where do you think this puts them in that sense?
Well, I think you definitely put them towards the top of this one. I think the only thing that was a problem for them last year was their offense. Their defense was elite. They're losing a couple of talent from their defense. Adrian Maddox has entered the transfer portal. Mikey Victor entered the NFL draft. 2 excellent defensive backs for them. I believe Andrew Ogletree also entered the NFL draft. I'm hoping I'm saying the right name on those, but they have an excellent defense. But I think the offense had left a lot to be desired, and I think Andrew Body is somebody who is a 2-way quarterback who can cover a multitude of sins for them. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to get one of their receivers back from the transfer portal, Keshawn Johnson, who previously committed to Vanderbilt but decommitted from them. I'm not sure if he has recommitted to another team since then, or if he's open to returning to Alabama State. That remains to be seen. But I think as of right now, just knowing what we know now with Andrew Body having been committed to Alabama State, it definitely makes them better, and it definitely puts them towards the top in the SWAC East, in the SWAC, and in the SWAC in general.
Yeah, I mean, like you said before, Jared, like the only thing that was kind of like holding Alabama State back was the consistency on offense, especially at quarterback. And you get a guy in like Andrew Body, who's a dual threat quarterback, who was preseason all SWAC a few years ago, a rising quarterback in the league to run an offense that just needed a little extra thump on the offense. I mean, it's a really tremendous hire. I mean, a tremendous get for Eddie Robinson Jr. I mean, like talking about a ASU team that won 7 games last year. That's the most games they had won since 2014. He had the second most wins in the SWAC, actually, tied with Jackson State, and obviously FAMU had the most winning the conference. But yeah, like I think this definitely puts them in the running for a SWAC East championship. They may not win it, but like they're going to be a tough out coming up this fall. So switching gears here for a minute. Now, one of the big stories in the last couple weeks has involved Florida A&M, and today they ironically celebrated their championship win in the Celebration Bowl with a rally at the school. Most of the players were there. I saw from the live stream they had earlier on Facebook. A.D. Sykes was there as well. James Cozy was there, who's the interim coach right now. And everybody was happy and smiling and celebrating their championship. But underneath that is obviously unrest with this football coaching search. You have alums, you have former players, you have current players who are not happy that Tiffany Dawn Sykes, the AD, has reportedly targeted Fort Valley State head coach Sean Gibbs to take over for Willie Simmons, who left for Duke. There's been so much, anger, outrage, whatever you want to call it, that the Florida A&M National Alumni Association, they voted no confidence in Tiffany Dawn Sykes. It's unfortunate that it happened. They don't believe she should pick Sean Gibbs as coach, to the point where like they don't even believe like the search should continue until she and others at FAMU do their due diligence. Now, a lot of FAMU alums, stakeholders close to the program, they hadn't been happy with many things about Tiffany Dawn Sykes. Number one, they feel like she hasn't been very transparent, not only with the search process for head coach, but just how she has ran the athletic department since she was named AD. They feel like there's no connection there between her and different groups. So, Garrett, that's a lot. So like, what do we think about this? Is the criticism of Tiffany Dawn Sykes, this potential hire, is it fair, or should she be given the autonomy and the power to do what she will with this particular position?
So there's a lot of layers to this. So when you got a team that has achieved championship success, it comes with the responsibility of repeating. When you win a championship, the fan base is looking at you and saying, we're good enough to win another one. Now, obviously, it was before Willie, took the job at Duke, so it's kind of blindsided him. And even before Willie left for Duke, you were losing Isaiah Major, you were losing Kendall Bowler, you were losing Jeremy Musa, you were losing Terrell Jennings, all these guys to the NFL draft. So you were gonna be in for an uphill battle either way. So I think it was you were going to have to. Am I back? Am I back? Good. So you were going to have to deal with all of the talent you were going to be losing to begin with, but now you're dealing with finding a replacement for a coach that you probably didn't even know was potentially going to be out the door. Now, to the question of, is the criticism fair? Not really. But but it's going to sound like I'm agreeing, but hear me out. If the players are dead set on having an in-house hire, you got to take it seriously. You got to at least interview one of the names that they pointed out. You got to at least show that you're willing to listen to them, because and a lot of people have been nitpicking, showing that video of that 2019 brawl or the altercation between North Carolina A&T when Sean Gibbs was on the coaching staff there, saying that because he was involved in that, he shouldn't be the coach of the team. Like, that's like, if you don't want him to be your coach, fine, but don't nitpick and say because of one little incident that he can't be the coach. We've seen coaches have altercations against teams on other coaching staffs and then go on to coach with a team he had an altercation with. That's not new. So we don't need to be nitpicking and saying stuff like that. If you want an in-house hire, just then say that. But don't nitpick and try to find the one little skeleton in Sean Gibbs' closet to try to keep him from being the coach. But I'll say that part of the criticism is fair, that if they want an in-house hire, you got to at least interview one of the coaches on your coaching staff that they pointed out that they want to be the coach. But I feel like this is warranting of patience. FAMU has not had a losing season since before Willie Simmons was hired, which was in 2018. So he's had a lot of success, and this program has had a lot of success in the past 5 years. So it's not like this team has been bad at all. So I feel like she is warranting of some patience. Now, if they don't have a coach by the next week or two, a full-time coach by the next week or two, then you can start to question and say, what's taking so long? We've already told you we want an in-house hire. Why haven't you made any progress into hiring somebody? But saying that you have no confidence in her as an athletic director is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, and about the criticism rendered to her over not having like an in-house candidate, I agree. Like some staff members from that championship team should be interviewed for the job, but that doesn't mean like she should be strong-armed, as it seems, for that to be possible. Like ADs at the end of the day, they have to do what's best for the program and then for the university. Like I know like players have voices and we want players to have voices, but at the same time, like a lot of these kids, they're not gonna be around in 1 or 2 years. And they vouch for a head coach and they hired a head coach and he doesn't perform well. Well, you're stuck investing all this money and all these resources into a coach that didn't advance the program forward on the advice of a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds. I don't think that's how a university could be run, despite the fact that like they need to be taken care of, they need to be catered to in a lot of ways. But like when you're talking about making a big time business decision that's going to have like long lasting impact on your program and on your university, like that takes a little bit more time to like try to do. And refer back to the story I wrote that published this morning. I know Richard Theus made a comment saying, yeah, like we can have like voices in the room and have their input and make suggestions. But at the end of the day, no matter what direction I go in and hiring a coach, like that decision is going to fall on me. If it goes south, it's going to fall on me. Nobody's going to say, well, like it's Reggie Theus's fault and it's the alumni association's fault for recommending this coach. No, people going to point at the AD and say like, hey, you're responsible for this. So I think like a lot of people got to keep that in mind when they say, well, the AD should listen to the players. The AD should listen to the alumni because they have a certain type of power and a certain type of voice. While that may be true, like it's all going to fall down on the ultimate decision maker to make this move. And so like I think a lot of alums should tread cautiously. And I think Tiffany Don Sykes, and we're not privy to anything that she's done because we're not in Tallahassee, but you have to give the AD some type of autonomy and not try to criticize her unfairly because she may be considering a coach that you don't want. And I think ego, as we saw in the Texas Southern situation, as our good friend Ken Rashad joins the show, has gotten away of their hire. And I'm pretty certain the folks down in Tallahassee don't want the same thing happen in regards to Florida A&M hiring the coach. Ken Rashad, your thoughts?
On FAMU, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know this is a little impromptu. You know what? And I don't want to necessarily repeat or reiterate anything that's already been said, but and I think both of you kind of touched on this. I think though, let me just say this, and this kind of goes towards the Texas Southern situation too. I understand that each institution, Texas Southern and FAMU, those are the two primary schools that we're talking about right now, have their very own unique way in which they go about doing things. Just because Texas Southern operates one way doesn't necessarily mean FAMU has to operate the same way and vice versa. I get all that. But I would just simply say this, given how all of this has played out, given how everyone pretty much assumed that Fred McNair was going to be the coach at Texas Southern and kind of where we are right now with FAMU and the situation that they're in right now, I would just simply say this from a general standpoint, that as unique as these situations are, unfortunately, this kind of, in some unique way, sheds a very unfortunate and unfortunate stereotype on, HBCUs and how they go about conducting business or how they go about doing things. That I think again, look how that Texas Southern situation played out. And the board of directors, A.D. Granger goes up to him, makes the recommendation, and then for whatever reason, it just went and it just went took a completely different path on its own. And I think it's safe to say that given how Texas Southern operated in that particular situation, Fred McNair is without a job right now. Fred McNair is not the coach. Had he been given some, and a source told me this morning that had Kevin Granger known at the time that he presented or made the recommendation that Fred McNair be the coach, that had he known what was going to transpire prior to him making that recommendation, and had he known what was going to happen after the fact, he would have told Fred McNair, you know what, it's out of my hands. They're not going to hire you. You might want to go ahead and see what you can do to keep your job at Alcorn State. I was told that this morning. So that's unfortunate. And it's stuff like that again, I think HBCUs unfairly are kind of like thrown out there, and there are always, folks who may not necessarily be aware of the nuances of HBCUs and may not necessarily appreciate the fact that they all operate differently. But how many times have we seen people go out on Twitter and say, well, what HBCUs really need to do is they need to do this and they need to do this, as if they all are supposed to operate the same way. But in a situation like this with Texas Southern, it's situations like that that gives HBCUs the unfortunate or the proverbial black eye. Why does that thing keep coming up?
I like what you're saying, Ken.
So I guess that's my overall takeaway. I hate to see this happen. The situation with FAMU and Tiffany Sykes, I guess maybe that's a different beast in which, from what we understand, the stakeholders, or I guess from what it appears, Tiffany Sykes is just completely ignoring what the stakeholders and what other individuals with some level of influence have indicated, the direction that they would like the program to go. That's a totally different situation. But still, just how all of this is kind of how this is being elevated in the public space. Unfortunately, I just think it kind of gives HBCUs just a unfortunate kind of a stereotypical effect that, that in this particular case, or why should I say with Texas Southern, you can't defend it. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, Ken, you've been saying for many years, you can't judge all black colleges based on the actions of maybe one or a few, but it seems like in the scenarios you presented that you feel that that might actually happen. So why is this situation different from all the other ones?
Why is what situation different?
Well, why would people think that this is how black colleges operate based on having that FAMU, having that Texas Southern? Why should we fear that stereotype, but not fear being stereotyped when something happens at another school on just an isolated basis?
Well, if the other school isn't necessarily an HBCU, then I think that in and of itself is the reason why. Things happen. Situations happen. Look at the situation at Florida State. For example, they've got this ongoing situation with the ACC in which now they're trying to get out, and they've got this issue with the grant of rights situation and all this other stuff. And I mean, that's not something that you just openly hear about all the time, but because of the dynamics, and I'm guessing a lot of it is probably due to the fact of what happened with the selection committee and them not necessarily making the playoffs, that didn't help. But I'm just simply saying, from a historical standpoint, historically speaking, everybody knows, historically speaking, top to bottom, HBCUs have been, generationally underfunded. We know that. We all know that HBCUs are applauded for doing more with less. We get all of that. But then unfortunately, because of all of that, I just think, there's that stereotype that in many ways that comes about in which some of us say, these HBCUs don't really know what they're doing or they have no clue. And when you put in consideration, 108, 109 HBCUs, again, these aren't the type of stories that you hear every day, even with HBCUs. It's just that maybe because of what we do in our space, we report these things, and then of course they just kind of take a leg and they grow on their own. But the bottom line is that I think in the greater scheme of things, these are still two very isolated incidents. But because of the fact that they're HBCUs, there is going to be a very different dynamic that folks on the outside looking in are going to kind of look at them with a side eye and say, that's the reason why I don't send my kids to them damn black schools. They say stuff like that.
And to that, I would say, if you live in Texas, just look at what happened to the school down in College Station. They had to pay millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to get rid of their head coach because of dysfunction that they perceived with him.
Right.
Yeah, but Ken, I think we have to be sensitive to the fact that like that thought process exists. Like, people think all black colleges are run the same way. I know when Deion Sanders left for Jackson State of Colorado, the university got a lot of that same sentiment. Well, somehow it must have been Jackson State's fault that Deion Sanders left, and somehow they're responsible for either not trying their darndest to pay him what he was owed, or appreciate him enough, or cater to his every whim, or just find a way, despite the fact that he had been angling for a Power 5 job since after his first season.
Right.
Yeah, that they should have done everything possible to keep him. And now, since he's left, all this commentary and all this opinions have been nothing but negative about Jackson State and the university and the city of Jackson itself, trying to justify like why Deion Sanders would want to leave and go to Colorado. So yeah, like, I think that's why it's important for like everybody associated with black colleges, especially when schools are placed in high profile positions like we've seen with Deion Sanders, like we see at FAMU and we see at Texas Southern, is to make sure that we are controlling the narrative. I know, was it last week, the Texas Southern National Alumni Association president wrote a letter to the school addressing that same concern about the university being stereotyped because of how the search process was going. So we have to be careful of how we address schools and address people in leadership, because at the end of the day, it's not a good look for individual schools, and unfortunately, it's going to be unfairly stereotyped that all HBCUs behave that same way.
Right, but let me just point out one primary difference between the Deion Sanders situation and him leaving Jackson State and the situation at Texas Southern. We knew what the deal was with that situation. I mean, we could defend Jackson State in that regard, and that Deion. Look, long story short, and I don't want to spend too much time on that. Deion Sanders ultimately left because he wanted to go someplace else, plain and simple. And you can't blame him for that. Jackson State couldn't pay him what Colorado was willing to pay him. Jackson State doesn't necessarily have the facilities that Colorado has. So, all of the bickering and everything that was said by Deion and his family members and so forth about Jackson, you can defend that because we knew what the truth was before that. What I'm saying is that you can't defend what Texas Southern and Board of Regents did. You can't defend that. That I think that's the primary difference. It was sloppy. It was foolishness, foolhardy. I mean, there's no defending that. And so I think that's the primary difference. But the situation at Texas Southern, I guess you can say was self-inflicted. The situation at Jackson State had nothing to do with what Jackson State did or didn't do. Now, granted, again, there's no such thing as someone said. There's no such thing as a perfect HBCU. There's no such thing as a perfect university. Period. That goes for Harvard, Yale, whatever the case may be. There's no such thing as a perfect school or perfect situation. There's always some sort of a flaw or something you can always be critical about. But the bottom line is that, you know, whatever perceptions that people had about Jackson State after Deion left, we could defend that because we knew, or those of us, you know, we can make an argument for that. You can't make an argument for the situation at Texas Southern. That's my point. As for what we're currently experiencing right now at FAMU, I don't know if that necessarily equates. I don't know if that's the same, but that remains to be seen. We don't know how this is all going to play out. So I'm not going to get too far into what the situation is at FAMU, but there is absolutely no way, no justification for trying to defend Texas Southern when everything and how that process, how they went about doing that, especially when you put in consideration what Kevin Granger, the athletic director, did and taking the proper steps and doing his due diligence, vetting the candidates and so forth. And then for Texas Southern's Board of Regents to do what they did, you can't defend that. You can't. And then all of a sudden now here we are, and Cris Dishman is the new head coach, and now Fred McNair is without a head coaching job, primarily doing in part because he thought he was going to get the head coaching job at Texas Southern. You know, you can't defend that.
Yeah, I mean, like the situation at Texas Southern is one of the most bizarre I've seen in a very long time. But Jared, you want to close us out on this topic?
Yeah, I think that since we're talking about comparing the situations between Texas Southern, Jackson State, and Florida A&M, I think the biggest difference in why Texas Southern shouldn't even be in the same conversation as what Jackson State and Florida A&M were going through is Texas Southern doesn't seem like they even know what they want. They didn't even know. I don't even think they knew what they wanted. I think they overthought it. Once they announced that Fred McNair was going to be in line for the job, and then they saw that Andre Johnson was available, they overthought it. You could have easily had Fred McNair as your head coach, a proven commodity, somebody who was known for having success not only in college football but in the SWAC in particular, and then just hired Andre Johnson to your staff if he's willing to do that. Now, maybe he wasn't willing to be on somebody's coaching staff. Maybe he wanted to lead a program. But Willie Simmons. Fred McNair was the clear choice because he's a guy that has success and he's known for being a top coach in the SWAC. But then they overthought it. Then they probably got a whole bunch of other guys that they saw that had some attractive names that were saying they wanted to be on that were willing to accept the job. There was a guy, I forget his name, but there's an assistant coach for the Kansas City Chiefs that said he was willing to be the coach of the team. Then you had all these guys coming out the woodwork saying that they wanted to be a coach, and then they're talking about they're interested in this person and this person. And I said it a couple of months ago. Fred McNair should just wipe his nose with it, because why would I want to be a coach of a team or a school that doesn't even seem like they know what they want? Like that, I think that's the biggest difference. Florida A&M, while yes, I feel like AD Sykes should give the team the courtesy of at least interviewing an in-house hire. I feel like at least she knows what she wants, though. At least Jackson State, whether we knew that Deion was going to be gone or not, which I think we can all agree that he was going to be gone sooner rather than later, at least they knew what they wanted too. And they made a snap decision. Not a snap decision as in they rushed it, but they knew who they wanted. And they made a decision. Florida ain't AD Sykes at least looks like she knows what she wants, and she is going to make an informed decision when she is ready. Texas Southern probably picked a name out of a hat and said, "Oh, that's the guy we want as our head coach." That's what it seems like. So
you know what? Well, Jared, let me stop you there, because I think, in fairness to Kevin Granger, that wasn't the case. I know for a fact that wasn't the case.
okay.
So, but to your point, I guess my point is that if you're going to blame Texas Southern for how they operated, the blame starts with the Board of Regents.
Right.
But I know for a fact that, now granted, I think the only criticism that people had prior to knowing who, before we even realized that Fred McNair was going to be the guy who they were going to initially make the offer to, I think the only criticism that people had about Texas Southern was how slow the process appeared to be going, considering that we were near early signing period. Other schools had already pretty much made their hiring choices. Texas Southern appeared to be kind of slow in that aspect. But I just want to say, in all fairness, I just think that Kevin Granger basically, I think, had his legs chopped. I'm not trying to, talk for you, but I just think that we need to set the record straight, and that Kevin Granger did what he was supposed to do as the AD. The blame starts, and from what I understand, okay, and here's another thing. The battle was not necessarily with Kevin Granger. The Board of Regents and Texas Southern's president, from what I understand, are the two entities that actually butt heads. The president wanted to support Granger. The Board of Regents wanted to go a different direction. So sorry, brother, I don't want to cut you off, but I just wanted to set the record straight that I think, with respect to facts being what they are, Kevin Granger took the proper steps.
No, yeah, and absolutely, it's totally fine, because it's definitely important that we make that distinction, that it's the Board of Regents, and because when you say Texas Southern, you leave that up to interpretation of whose fault it could potentially be. So 100% understand that, but like the point is, though, when we talk about comparing Florida A&M to Texas Southern, I don't think that those should be in the same sentence. The only crime of AD Sykes that, and this is me paraphrasing, I don't know this to be a fact, but it at least looks like she is not even giving consideration to what the players want. And that is dangerous, because we have seen, even when schools make a hire based on the recommendation of the players or the coach that preceded them, even then you had a slew of players enter the transfer portal the year after. We saw it happen at Bowie State. We saw it happen at Jackson State. We saw it happen, where else? Morgan State. We've seen coaches get fired. The school makes a hire based on the recommendation of the players and the coach, and you still had a large group of players enter the transfer portal afterwards. What do you think is going to happen when you don't listen to your players and you make a hire that they don't want? They're either going to have to be stuck there, and they don't have the confidence of the coach, and their effort is going to show on the field, or you're going to have guys who have no allegiance and can go as they please and will get FBS offers. We see Gentle Hunt, who entered the transfer portal, getting FBS offers. We've seen all the other guys who are entering the NFL draft who are already leaving. So you don't have a lot of room for error. You have a lot of guys who have committed from Florida State and other FBS programs who committed to you this offseason who have not signed yet. So they are not, they're free to go. They're free to decommit at any moment. We've seen guys decommit in the past couple of weeks since Willie Simmons has left. So it's not, you have no free range to say, I hear what the players are saying, but I already know what I want. No, you have to at least give them that consideration of, okay, I'm not sure how much of this championship team I can retain, or how much I can set, what's the word I'm looking for? Retain. Yeah, basically retain. How much I can retain with the in-house hire or someone that is respected in the HBCU space or has coaching experience. But I'm going to at least give these guys the courtesy so that I can have their trust. Because once you lose their trust, you've lost the team. And once you lose the team, you're starting from square one. And this is probably going to be a multi-year rebuild, something that they have not done since before Willie. So I think the only crime of AD Sykes is that it doesn't look like she is taking the players' requests under consideration. But I still stand by the point of it. She is receiving unwarranted criticism, and having no confidence in her is over the line. That is way over the line. She has proven plenty that she is capable of being in that position. She is there for a reason. If you ask Willie, I guarantee you he would say that she is capable of doing the job. I guarantee if you ask anybody else on that coaching staff if she's capable of doing that job, they would say absolutely. I guarantee if you even went back, if we had a time machine and went back before the 2023 season, those same people that's saying they have no confidence in her would not be saying that now. Just because because of one crime that she doesn't seem like she's willing to listen to the request of the players, that you're saying you have no confidence in her. That's what saying no confidence means, that you don't think that she is capable of doing the job. She's been at the job for years before Willie ever was even thought about for this Duke running back coach job. So, yeah, I feel like they're jumping the gun with the no confidence, and I think that she's warranting of some patience.
I will say, I will add this one point with respect to what you just said, Jared. Isn't it kind of amazing that these no confidence votes, when they do take place, they always surround themselves, and they're always related to football.
Yeah, nobody cares if you hire a baseball coach.
No, it's always about football for whatever reason. When these no confidence issues, Grambling had its own unique situation with players wanting to vote no confidence against the president, and it was always. We've seen this before. It comes up all the time, and it's always about football. I'll just leave it at that.
But that's because for football, like in a lot of ways, it's the front porch of the university. The head coach is in a lot of ways the face of the university. And speaking of just Cable, the AD at Alabama State, he said, like, yeah, when you hire a football coach, you got to take into account that this move is going to affect not just the football program, but the university in terms of like support, in terms of like economic reach and economic investment, because it's not only the largest sport at a school, it generates the most money for the athletic department, maybe outside of basketball. And so like you got to factor all that in when you hire a football coach. It's not just like hiring like a baseball coach or a softball coach or a track and field coach. Like they don't have the same bottom line impact that football does. And so that's why there's so much scrutiny over these hires, because people know like, hey, like you're gonna be tasked with putting somebody in place in their job that's gonna speak for the university, either on the field or off the field. And I saw some funny stat out there yesterday. Like when Nick Saban took over Alabama, there were 20,000 students, and by the time he retired, Alabama had 40,000 students. So just judging the impact of football is tremendous. And we've seen it like with the Celebration Bowl. Like North Carolina A&T said they had a dramatic increase in enrollment,
right? Exactly right.
Because their football team had won the Celebration Bowl. People gravitate to the sport because it's so communal, it's so tribal, it generates all types of emotions out of you. And so like that's why these hires are scrutinized. But I want to ask y'all this before we leave. Like, what does this say about how much respect do these alumni groups and even boards have for the power of the AD? Because it seemed like in some ways the power of the AD at Texas Southern and at Florida A&M is being undercut a little bit.
Well, yeah. Let me just say now. Don't get me wrong. There needs to be a certain level of communication between the AD, the president, and any stakeholder, worth having input. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case. It should be the case. And for the sake of the overall benefit of not only the program, but the institution in and of itself, you have to have, look, politics are always involved in situations like this, especially when money is involved, whether it be power, whatever the case may be, respectability, a place at the table. You have to respect all of those entities because of obviously the role that they play in helping support your program. But I just think that overall, and again, the situation varies from school to school, institution to institution, that you ultimately have to allow the AD whom you've appointed to oversee athletics. You have to give that person a certain level of flexibility to kind of navigate as he or she sees fit. And if for whatever reason things don't work out after you've seen the result of those decisions, whether they've accumulated and you decide, okay, now it's time to go a different direction, you're well within your right to do so. My thing is that ultimately, if you're going to hold somebody accountable for whether it be a coach or athletic director, president, or whatever the case may be, if you're going to hold somebody accountable for what they do or don't do, let them do it. And then let's find out what the results are before you decide whether or not you want to have a vote of no confidence or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, Jerry, got anything on this one?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, do you think the power of the AD in the situation with Texas Southern and FAMU is being compromised because of certain groups want to insert themselves in these coaching hire decisions?
It's tough to say. I think this just shows that HBCUs have an investment in the success of their football programs, and they want the best for their program. But I think it shows, and when I say this word, it's going to sound derogatory, but I'm not meaning it in this way, but it shows a lot of ignorance as to what an athletic director goes through and has to go through, and how they have to pivot and at the snap of a finger. I don't think that AD Sykes was envisioning that she would have to go on a coaching search after just not even a full month after they won the Celebration Bowl. I think they were still riding the high of winning the Celebration Bowl. Now, obviously, they had to worry about early signing day and regular signing day, so the job wasn't going to stop for them. But I still think that they were equipped to deal with the signing days. They weren't equipped to going through a search for a head coach. Texas Southern was. They knew that they weren't going to renew McKinney's contract probably before the season started. Don't quote me on that, but I think it shows that there's a level of ignorance toward what ADs go through, and they're wanting to see the program succeed kind of blinds them from seeing the AD's perspective on the situation.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna make sense to see how this situation at FAMU plays out with whoever they hire as their football coach and what happens with AD Sykes. I mean, it's unfortunate it ended up that way because it kind of spoiled a really good season that FAMU actually had. winning the SWAC and winning the Celebration Bowl and being Black College champions. So hopefully we have a resolution on that pretty soon. But we thank everybody for joining us. Jared Hoffman, thanks for your time. Kim Rashad, thanks for your time. Cris Dishman was on earlier. He had his comments. We thank him for joining us too. And be sure to visit our website, hbcusports.com.
Also, make sure you visit our store, hbcusportsstore.com.
Yeah, we do have a new store that we're gonna be
adding more products. It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
If you see how like AA and SIAC, like wherever, it's coming. I promise you. Yeah. Even that person at Langston that cursed me out, it's coming. I promise. Ooh-wee, man.
Can't wait to see that Bowie State gear.
It's coming.
That Bowie State gear.
It's coming, man. It's coming.
Whatever your favorite school is, even if it's Grambling State, you can like buy stuff off there too.
Well, I made sure to get that on there, of course. Right?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But be sure to, follow us on social media on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook, and obviously on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today. It was a really good discussion. We hope to see you pretty soon.
Thank you, folks.